હવે, what I want to underline is, Paris is the first city to be modernized, and Paris is the first city to be industrialized. I will talk a little about Paris and the poet of Paris, that is, the poet of urban poetry of Paris. Baudelaire is the first poet. Baudelaire is the first poet of modern industrial city, which is Paris. He said the tone, નગર કવિતાનો ટોન, એનો પિતા, એનો સંસ્કાર એને સ્થાપ્યો છે. જે પછી જગતભરના કવિઓએ, નગર કવિતાના આધુનિક કવિઓએ જે વારસામાં મેળવ્યો છે. And every poet throughout the world has acknowledged Baudelaire as the father of modern industrial.
Once again, here I am at NID. I have been here before, many times, once a year at least, over the past 1 decade. I cherish happy memories of this place and of the people here, both students and teachers. That these interactions gave me great joy. I do not know about the students, but I hope that they shared it with me. Talking to students has always been for me an exciting experience. Here at NID, it took on one more dimension. Here, I met students who studied design and talked to them about literature. Literature consists of works of literary art. Also, a work of art, of literary art, is not something amorphous or haphazard. It's an integrated whole, a unified whole. It has organic unity. It has harmony. One may say it has its own pattern, its own design. Thus, literature and design have something in common. Meeting students of design and talking to them about literature was for me a sharing, a collaboration, a co-adventure in the realm of joy and beauty. Today, I am here not to talk about literature, Indian literature, ancient or modern. I propose to make a departure, a deviation. I'll read a poem by a mid-19th century French poet, La Cygne by Charles Baudelaire, in English translation, The Swan, and talk about it. The poem was written in 1859. It is to be read against the background of Paris, the Paris of the Second Empire, the Paris of Napoleon III and Baron Haussmann, the Paris of Les Passages and Les Boulevards, of Les Flâneurs and Les Foules. Paris was Haussmannized from 1853 to 1870. Haussmannization of Paris, or the transformation of Paris, the modernization of Paris, was conceived by Napoleon III and was executed by Baron Haussmann, the prefect of the Seine. It metamorphosed medieval Paris into modern Paris. Paris became the first modern city in the world. Paris, in this poem, is not only Paris, the capital of France, but it is also any great modern city. It's a symbol of all great modern cities of the world. The swan in this poem is not only a swan, a bird, or an object, an image, but it is also a symbol of all exiles, of all times and of all places. The poem is dedicated to Victor Hugo, a master poet who revealed le mystère de la vie in his poetry and who was himself a voluntary exile from 1851 to 1870. Hugo was in Baudelaire's mind, en passant à vous, when he wrote this poem. Hugo in this poem is not only Hugo, but is also a symbol of Les Misérables, a symbol of all exiles. La Cygne is the first poem in the famous trilogy. The other two poems are Les Sept Vieillards and Les Petites Vieilles in Tableau Parisien, section 2, in the 1861 edition, the second edition of Les Fleurs du Mal. All three poems are dedicated to Victor Hugo and are devoted to the exiles in Paris. The poem is divided into two parts. Part 1 is made up of 7 quatrains and Part 2 of 6 quatrains. Each quatrain has the same line length, the Alexandrine, and the same rhyme scheme, AB, AB. The poet thinks of Andromache. Why Andromache? One may seek the answer to this question in the neoclassical facade of the new buildings around Carousel, or in the poet's mother, Caroline, who, like Andromache, was twice widowed by 1857, or in the poet's reading of Virgil's The Aeneid, Book 3, from which a phrase was quoted as an epigraph to the poem when it was first published in La Causerie in 1860, or of Racine's Andromache, or in what you will. But to find any rational answer is to miss the poem. The poet, as a flaneur, while crossing the new Carousel during his flânery, suddenly thinks of Andromache. The poet presents Andromache as an exile, an archetypal exile from Troy, now in Epirus, where she has created a false Simva, in memory of the original Simva, a river on whose bank the city of Troy stood, and flooded it with tears that reveal her sad nostalgia. The immense majesty of her widow's grief shines in the very first quatrain of the poem, as it did long ago in that little stream, poor and sad mirror, the false Simva. Andromache is an exile from Troy because of the destruction of Troy. Now she can never return to Troy, hence her nostalgia and the false Simva. It enriches the poet's fertile memory. The poet, like Andromache, is also an exile from old Paris, La Vie à Paris, because of the destruction of old Paris. Now he can never return to the old Paris, hence his nostalgia and the poem, his false Simva. The immense majesty of the poet's grief shines in the entire poem. But the poet does not say it in so many words. He is almost silent about it. He merely suggests it. Only in his mind he sees the destruction of old Paris, where, among its confused bric-a-brac, he saw one morning a swan. The swan also is, like Andromache and the poet, an exile from his lovely natal lake in an ugly modern Paris with its refuse dump, dry pavement, rough ground, dried up gutter and dust. He can never return to his lovely natal lake, hence his nostalgia and his cry and his reproaches hurled at God. Andromache is a classical myth, hence the immense majesty of a widow's grief. The swan is a new myth, a modern myth, hence his tortures and torments. He rubs dry pavement with his webbed feet, drags his white plumage on the rough ground, opens his beak near a dried up gutter, bathes his wings frantically in the dust, cries against sterility and stagnation, stretches his anxious head on his convulsive neck again and again towards the ironic and cruelly blue sky, as if to curse God. Part 2 continues the theme of Part 1, the transformation of Paris, the swan, and Andromache. But there is a turn, and the poem now deepens and widens itself. Part 1 deals with the past, though seen through the present, and with Andromache, Paris, and the swan as objects or images. Part 2 deals with the present, and with Paris, the swan, and Andromache as symbols. The poet, who was merely sad at the transformation of Paris, now bears the burden of my melancholy and my cherished memories, which are heavier than the rocks. Everything for me becomes an allegory, he says. The swan and Andromache become symbols. They symbolize all exiles. The poet, and the poem also, is at the command of his memories. There's a tremendous rush of other associations. The poet breathlessly presents a procession of lesser exiles, the negress, those who have lost that which can never, never be found, those who quench their thirst with tears and suck at grief, the orphans, the sailors forgotten on an island, the captives, the slaves, and many, many more, which includes you and me, maybe. It's a pageant, a portrait gallery, perceived as if in a dream or in a reverie. It is presented in a supreme poetic shorthand. There is a variety of exiles from a variety of sources and a variety of causes. Exiles in space and time, exiles from Greece, Rome, Africa, almost the whole world, and of course from Paris, La Vie of Paris, the poet himself. Exile from goodness, from happiness, from the ideal. Exiled by fate, by desire, by violence. In short, eternal and universal exiles. The climax of part 1 and part 2, reproaches at God and many, many more, suggests that all of us are exiles from Eden because of our original sin. Thus, the swan in the end is a symbol of all exiles, a symbol of our eternal loss and our eternal longing. The poem is a great symbolic poem, the first great symbolic poem. It is paradise lost with no hope of a sequel. Thus, it is also a great modern poem, the first great modern poem.